perfect. Okay, it's time to finish this. The Chucky franchise has experienced a million different changes since the 80s, but thankfully, we made it through them. I don't know how. I really don't. There's been some questionable times, okay? Even with a burnt-in timecode. So this is why I didn't notice. And because we are so weathered and battle-hardened, let's jump back into the world of murderous dolls one more time. Yeah, I know I don't have a lot of Christmas decks going on in this room, okay? I've got this little tree here. The 7th entry in the Child's Play franchise, the film that somehow managed to be both a passion project to the fans of the series and a complete and utter mess. In a great way. I'm really keeping you on the ropes here, aren't I? It's like having this chaotic person enter your life and you're trying to decide whether to befriend them or just run away, and this person ends up coming on a night out and you decide, you know what? They're pretty cool, and you have a great time. You know, I think Cult of Chucky is a little bit like that.
That's right. He was a fantasy. A delusion.
It's a film that plays with horror conventions and some wild decisions, but I understand it might not be for everyone. At first, I wasn't so keen on this film, but what changed? What makes Cult of Chucky unique, especially considering the franchise's long history of ups and downs? We've got dolls with knives, a borderline Lovecraftian exploration of the human psyche, a mental asylum, and of course, Chucky himself, voiced by the ever-beloved Brad Dourif. Okay, we can't get enough of him on this channel. Cult of Chucky kicks off like a bat out of hell. So the film is set several years after the Curse of Chucky, which I covered in the previous video, where Nika Pierce, played by the excellent Fiona Dourif, who of course is Brad Dourif's daughter, and could be considered the heir of the Chucky throne, has been locked away in a mental institution. Why? Because she has been framed for the murders committed by Chucky in the previous film. So Andy Barclay is now an adult and he keeps the severed head of Chucky and tortures it, effectively trying to get information out of him. And to be fair, these scenes with Andy and Chucky's head they're pretty funny. They do have this weird long-running relationship.
What if you really are crazy? Have you ever thought of that?
Off the bat, this feels incredibly different from our preconceived expectations of a Chucky film, unless you count, those. Cult of Chucky doesn't exactly play by the rules, and I like that in a film, to an extent. Instead, it uses this setting, a psychological facility, to introduce a fresh, new type of horror. It's like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest if Jack Nicholson had been replaced with a doll that murders everyone. In fact, the asylum setting evokes classic horror movies like The Shining, because let's face it, the isolated setting, insane characters, and rise in paranoia are all pretty Shining-esque. Maybe I'm just in a Jack Nicholson mood today. Whatever that means. Or even something like Session 9, where the tension inside of the mental facility runs high as reality and delusion blur together.
I think it was a broken heart.
But here, we don't just have one haunted mind to contend with, oh no, of course not. Cult of Chucky introduces a whole bunch of mental patients who may or may not be imagining the same murderous doll that's running amok. It's not the best thing to have running around a place like this, but, spices it up a little bit. Oh god.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Honestly, it's a pretty awesome concept. Brad Dourif's return to this role is of course the best part of the film. And of course these films are completely built around his character, but it's the implementation of other characters which really brings him to life, and I think Fiona Dourif coming into this franchise was, kind of a stroke of genius. It was a really good idea because you see their relationship. Honestly, you're just watching them have fun on screen, It just looks like a good time, despite the death. It's interesting how Chucky's personality has gone through so many different shifts, and we've seen all of them in all their glory. So now it's pretty much established that Chucky is a parody of himself. We don't really know what to expect, and I kind of have turned to like that. He's not just a doll on a killing spree anymore. He is a snarky, self-aware, almost meta version of a slasher villain, and this self-awareness became a pretty common thing outside of the Chucky franchise too. I mean, films like Scream also went full throttle on being self-aware of horror movie tropes. What stands out here is the way Cult of Chucky blends Brad's sort of comedic approach with a more deeply layered mythology. See, now he is a fully fledged nightmare, primarily because he's learnt so much about the doll form and about voodoo and what he can do with it, which admittedly still continues to be a bit of a cheat code, but you know, is what it is. I mean, he's so desperate to swap bodies that he's even teaching other dolls how to possess people. That's dedication, all in order to terrorize and kill the staff and its patients. And Nika discovers that Chucky's soul-splitting ability allows him to control several entities at once, and the chaos builds as she fights to survive and escape the asylum. The cult in question isn't just a group of Chucky dolls, of course, it's an ideology, you know, one that symbolizes the far-reaching influence of trauma and evil. What's most shocking is how the film implements the psychological implications of Chucky's presence, not just through surface-level slashing, murdering victims, but it also shows a lot of Nika's emotional state, which is fantastic.
And they call me sick? This guy is diabolical.
As she gets more and more paranoid, we start questioning if Chucky is really there, or if it's just all in her mind. It's classic unreliable narrator territory, but again, it's another nice spin because, as we've seen, it's usually just the adults who can't believe the kids in these films, and we're not sure if we can even believe the victim anymore. It's kinda concerning. Cult of Chucky isn't just a slasher, it's a surprisingly well-constructed commentary on trauma and identity. By bringing Nika back into the fold, the film asks big questions about how we carry the weight of the past with us. Nika is an interesting character in the sense that she is both a victim and a survivor, you know, very similar to Andy Barclay. And sure, she's stuck in a mental institution, but her mental unraveling doesn't just stem from Chucky's attacks alone. It's a consequence of being gaslighted by everyone around her, from her sister to the people in the institution. It's not just about surviving the killings. Cult of Chucky is about surviving the memory of the killings. It's about living with the idea that you are forever haunted by something that may or may not even be real. Chucky then is both the catalyst for her trauma and the manifestation of it. This is a theme we see so much in horror films. I mean, take Psycho, for example, where Norman Bates' own mental fragmentation is directly linked to the identity of his character. He was written to be flawed, which is kind of how, you know, the best characters are made. I mean, all characters have some kind of problems going on. And it's done exceptionally well in this film specifically. There's this constant push-pull between whether Nika's descent into madness is caused by Chucky's manipulation or her own mind betraying her.
A mother's love never dies.
Not even when she kills it.
The film's cinematography takes me back to that OG Italian style, and of course that inspired a film which I always talk about, Suspiria. I feel like I reference Suspiria a little bit too much, but I just can't help it. You've got really punchy, garish colours, eerie close-ups, and frequent shots of the doll's face that just evokes this sense of paranoia. These choices remind us that, of course, Chucky is a manifestation of pure chaos. It's a jarring visual contrast to the sterility of the institution. This place is too clean to me. I'm glad Chucky did a bit of decoration. Okay, this kill was phenomenal, I can't lie. I'd like to think Chucky learned from Tiffany and Bride and just replicated the same thing. Listen, it's not about who did it first, it's about who did it better.
Sometimes I scare myself.
I guess you guys can debate this in the comments. We also can't talk about the Cult of Chucky without mentioning the music. This score, composed by Joseph LaDuca, channels the pulse-pounding, synthesizer-heavy vibes of 80s horror. It's both nostalgic and contemporary, at the same time. There are so many ways to utilize audio to really push the fear factor of your film. There's a haunting, almost operatic quality to some of the music, and it contrasts well with Chucky's childish voice and the horror of the situation, and it creates this unsettling atmosphere, like you're caught between a nightmare and a bad childhood memory. No doubt a perfect soundtrack for a movie where you're not entirely sure if Chucky is inside your head or sitting behind you with a knife. In the final confrontation, Chucky successfully transfers part of his soul into Nika, fully possessing her body. So effectively, this Nika-Chucky hybrid, oh, that's a sentence, she remains alive whilst all the friends she made in the asylum perish. Very sad. So obviously at the end of Seed, Tiffany possessed the body of the actress Jennifer Tilly, who also plays her. You know, it's very fun and confusing. Well, they both leave the facility with larger plans in mind. Or rather, Don has larger plans, which we weren't sure about until later. So after all of this, why does Cult of Chucky stand out in the franchise? It's a tough question because, for all its over-the-top moments, Cult of Chucky is effective in taking a horror icon and giving them new layers. It's funny, it's meta, it's creepy, and it's really emotionally charged, and I do like how experimental it gets. It manages to be both self-aware on its legacy and an exploration of psychological horror, all while still being true to what made Child's Play so iconic in the first place. The fact that a doll can scare the hell out of you. If this scared people, then it did a good job. It does feel a lot more out there. I mean, not on the level that Bride or Seed does, but in a different way, in a more horror-oriented way. It does feel like a direct continuation of Curse while implementing these avant-garde elements, which, you know, brings a whole fresh take to the franchise. So on my first watch through, I did find it a little bit jumbled in terms of the narrative and the pacing, and you know, it did feel a little bit convoluted, but it's one of those rare cases where you come back a second time, you can tie the knots together and be like, okay, you know what? It's kind of good. And I think this was a far better time to introduce this sort of cult aspect, because this was originally going to come out right after Child's Play 2, as opposed to Child's Play 3. We got the whole military camp setting as opposed to having loads of Chucky dolls, and I think to an extent, I think it was the right move, so I guess I do have Child's Play 3 to thank for that. Yeah. So, it's going over here. I feel like this is a fair spot. If you're enjoying this video so far, feel free to subscribe, it means the world.
Introducing your new best friend, Buddy.
Ah! Oh my god, what the fuck is that? Yeah, so this was a weird decision. I think most people's response to this was, Brad Dourif isn't in this film? Okay. I'm not gonna watch it. The doll looks really weird. Why is this happening? Where is my Chucky? You know, give me my original Chucky back, please. I don't want this abomination. And I have to admit, I was one of these people. I put this film off for the longest time, and then a few people just started saying, you know what, it's not that bad. It's actually like a decent film. So I decided to watch it, and I walked away fairly surprised. 2019 Child's Play, the film that divided fans, sparked endless debates about doll-based horror, and threw a cybernetic wrench into an already beloved franchise. But there was a lot of mixed reactions to this film, especially because of the lack of Brad Dourif and the implementation of AI as opposed to voodoo. You know, people just weren't on board. What did they do to my baby? Like, seriously, what is this? A futuristic Terminator meets Toy Story, and I think, in a lot of ways, that's exactly what we got. The film opens in a Vietnamese factory where a disgruntled employee decides to disable all safety protocols on a Buddy doll before tossing it into a shipping crate, like it's no big deal. A shocking display of corporate negligence, if I've ever seen one. Truly disgraceful. Hey! Oh. I don't know why I found that so funny. It's just the idea you're sat at your desk and then your boss just comes up to you and just, hey, oh, you missed your quota? Oh, okay. Oh, you didn't participate in the company's Secret Santa? Wait, did you just ask for a pay rise? Now this is when we do see the 2019 Child's Play try to differentiate itself from the original Child's Play. This being that the doll wasn't possessed by a serial killer, but is instead the result of technology going wrong. An AI programmed to be your best friend. There's a certain modern horror appeal to this. The idea that the technology we invite into our homes, the ones designed to keep us connected, entertained and safe, could instead turn on us. You know, like typical 1984 vibes. It's not the most original concept, obviously, but it's also good to mention that Don Mancini wasn't directly involved in this film because he was working on his own thing. It was produced by a different creative team led by Lars Klevberg, with a script written by Tyler Burton Smith. Why was it made? Well, one side of me wants to say that the producers wanted to reimagine Child's Play for a new generation of viewers, so hopefully they can go back and watch the originals. You know, just trying to update it with modern technology and implementing new themes, maybe things we haven't seen before. I mean, you know, the other explanation could have been that the producers wanted to use a household name to make more money. Look, as long as the film is good and doesn't have some questionable behind-the-scenes stuff going on, I couldn't really care less. Enter Andy Barclay. Yep, they gave him the exact same name. I don't really know why, but alright. He's the new kid in town who doesn't seem to have many friends. His mum is an overworked single parent, played by Aubrey Plaza. So his mum Karen, yep, same name, she gets him a buddy doll for his birthday.
Your buddy is now connected.
Whoa.
Now let's look at Chucky's new look and personality. Personally, I'm not a big fan. Look, okay, the Good Guys doll became so iconic, I can't wrap my head around this new look. It just feels like an entirely different franchise, like it shouldn't even be called Child's Play, but this is what it is. I don't really know why anyone would want this, like it's just not even cute. Moving on. Okay, so it's pretty obvious that Brad Dourif is a very hard act to follow, so the producers had to take a step back and go to the drawing board and wonder, okay, who else do we know can voice a maniac? Oh wait, I think I know one. Mark Hamill is versatile, there's no doubt about it. He's done like everything under the sun at this point. Dourif's Chucky was a terrifying figure, but also deeply human, driven by the soul of a killer. You know, quite corrupted, but he was a human. Hamill's Chucky, on the other hand, is more cold, mechanical, and it works for this film because Hamill was able to be a blank slate. At least at the start. This iteration of Chucky is all about learning from Andy and taking all the data around his environment to become emotionally attached. What's brilliant here though is that the filmmakers make us buy into this relationship between Andy and Chucky. The movie's first act has this surprisingly sweet, almost tragic sense of bonding between the two. Chucky's not the bloodthirsty monster we're used to in the beginning. He's a naive, emotionally confused doll who just wants to be Andy's friend. Ah, that's so cute. That is so adorable. I hope they get along. The horror grows quite slowly as we see Chucky interpreting Andy's world in a very negative light, which leads him to take matters into his own hand and, you know, decide, oh, what's a good idea? Oh, let's kill people.
It's fucking loud.
It's fucking loud.
But don't worry, it's because he wants to protect Andy, you know? He loves him, friends to the end and all that. So Chucky starts to exhibit strange and kind of unsettling behaviour. He becomes overly protective of Andy, so he starts lashing out at what he perceives as threats, like a cat.
You can't do that, okay?
You can't do that? Mate, if I saw a doll strangling my dog, oh, that doll is getting obliterated. One of my favourite aspects about this film in particular is how Mark Hamill changes his tone from this very neutral, kind of flat, singular emotion to this maniacal outlook on the world. It's one of those underappreciated moments of character development because you can just see something happening, it doesn't need to be told to you. It's a great take on the AI gone rogue trope that's been popping up more and more in recent sci-fi and horror films, from Ex Machina to Westworld. We've seen this idea explored before, but rarely with a killer doll, until Megan came out and did a pretty good job. Alright, shoot me, okay? Look, I like Megan. I like Megan. What are you gonna do? Chucky is just trying to be a good friend. He just doesn't understand that murdering people is a bad way to demonstrate that. Fuck me, that's horrifying. It's not his fault, guys. Come on. You gotta have some sympathy for this guy. Maybe not. So once Chucky's learning curve reaches its apex, things go south in spectacular fashion. He starts, helping Andy. Yeah, helping. By eliminating anything that poses a threat to their friendship, like Andy's mum's boyfriend, Shane, who's played by David Lewis, who has a tendency to yell at Karen and just be generally, a pretty bad person. We've all seen what happens to these types of characters in horror films. They're kind of expendable. Chucky's first... If you're gonna hang around, then you're gonna just have to stay still, mate. Sorry about that. The game is the game, and you are getting tied to my piano. There you go. Chucky's first kill is pretty tragic, but kind of funny. And of course, as the body count rises, so does the chaos. And I think the film utilizes technology to a really good extent, to really ramp up the horror elements, and it gets very creative. Really creative, in fact.
It's time to play.
Damn. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Chucky hacks into other smart devices using drones, and even takes over a car, all to make his kills seem realistic in this modern connected world. The doll's murderous rampage is driven by his ability to manipulate and control every device in his vicinity. It's a commentary on our increasing dependence on technology, and of course, it's all bound to go wrong at some point. Maybe you ever watched too much Terminator. The movie raises the question, what if your friendly neighborhood AI assistant went full HAL 9000? Okay, let's try it. Gemini, what is your favorite Chucky film?
Seed of Chucky.
At the same time, this movie does something unique compared to other horror films. It leans into the comedic aspect of Chucky's interactions with modern tech. The horror becomes less about who he's killing, but more about how he's going to do it. There's something really dark and absurd about a doll who's trying to make use of tech tools in order to stage a home invasion, and kind of shines a light on 21st century paranoia.
Are we having fun now? Andy, what's happening?
Andy, no! No!
Andy!
The cinematography by Mark Spicer takes full advantage of tight spaces, high-tech environments, and dark, ominous shadows. So after being discarded and basically disabled, Chucky is able to reactivate himself, and he's able to connect to other smart devices in the Kanslan ecosystem, which basically makes him way more powerful, so he plans an even bigger attack. The final scenes in the mall, where Chucky uses all his tech abilities to hunt Andy down, left me pretty satisfied, because we're expecting a crescendo, like a climax, which the Child's Play predecessors have all done to various degrees of success. For me, I think the ending of Child's Play 2 is like peak, and the ending of Child's Play 3 made me want to go to a theme park. I don't know why.
Tabletop activated.
Okay, well, this buddy doll might actually give our good guy doll a bit of a run for his money. As for the music, it's pretty standard stuff. It's quite synth-heavy, composed by Bear McCreary, and he's worked on The Walking Dead, 10 Cloverfield Lane, and it does match the technological vibe of the film, which, again, you want the music to match the tone and the idea you're going for. It's pretty good, it does a decent job at creating the sense of dread during these build-up tense moments, and then it kind of switches up the tempo, wherever there's some absurdism going on. The score takes advantage of that eerie mix of joy and menace that comes with the juxtaposition of a toy-like character doing horrifying things. It's clever, and it does its job without being too intrusive. It's what you'd really want from a horror film. It's nothing to write home about, and it's, not really as iconic as the OG Child's Play song, but it's its own thing. So of course at the end of the film Chucky is defeated, and yet the film still hints that his corruptive programming might persist, which of course leaves room for continuation. That never happened. I'm kind of glad it didn't. Like a lot of people, my initial concern was having this remake fail to be a worthwhile watch, whether that be with its themes or execution. I didn't just want it to be a shot-for-shot remake with a modern twist, and amidst the vast array of films which deal with matters of AI, it's not something which stands out massively. Most people would probably just get more out of a Black Mirror episode or something along similar lines. But I did actually find 2019 Child's Play to be a decent watch. You know, it's enjoyable, it's quite a fun film in its own right. And when it comes to reboots, remakes, you know, wherever this is, a lot of the time it can be half-arsed, especially with sequels, prequels. A lot of people just don't give it the time of day to produce a good project, and with this, there's a lot of passion. There is a lot of passion in this project. But I went in with the hope of a well-produced gore fest which lives up to the likes of the Chucky franchise, and I was presented with even more than that. I'll give it its, I'll give it its flowers. It's decent, okay? It felt more akin to like a Saw film. Gorier, felt more grounded, since voodoo wasn't a thing anymore, which is why I said I was surprised, because I genuinely didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did. Nowadays, I try not to ask myself, was this film needed? Because that feels like a void question, feels outdated. It's not the nature of the industry. What matters is, can producers get people into seats, even if it's a rehash of something else? Like, that's just how it is. Don't get me wrong though, that's not the direction I wish the industry would go, but this is no Miyazaki film, okay? It's not a Fincher film, but it is a film you can sit down and enjoy, and sometimes that's enough. It was a bit of a curveball, but to me a welcome one if you're into AI and gore. I'd also highly recommend you watch Upgrade. Yeah, that's just me pushing one of my favourite films ever. Similar subject matter. If you haven't seen Upgrade, go watch it. I can't believe it. I actually can't believe it. We did it, guys. We've made it to the present. From the 80s to now, what's happened to Chucky after Cult? It kind of left on a cliffhanger. Shock. It looks like Chucky has landed himself in a TV series. I guess this is what Don was working on all this time. So far I've only discussed feature films, and I've tried to boil them down as short as possible so as to not put people to sleep. But to cover 3 seasons is a lot, and I don't want to give too much away for anyone who hasn't seen it. But obviously still a spoiler warning, especially for some season 1 stuff, considering I'm going to be using a lot of footage. So this will be more like a why you should watch segment. This is a fully fledged expansion of the Child's Play universe where no one is safe. Family drama is just as deadly as a sharp knife, and dolls come with deep emotional baggage, as if they didn't before. It's horror, teen angst, and black comedy, all wrapped into one bloody package. First things first, Chucky the TV series is a continuation of the Child's Play saga, but it's also very much a reboot. This series picks up directly after the events of Cult of Chucky, but it doesn't ignore the earlier entries. Why is that? Well, it's because it's all written by the same person. It doesn't go off the rails like some things do. The show throws us into a small town where we meet Jake, played by Zachary Arthur. Jake's newfound friendship with Chucky spirals into a full-blown killing spree. Jake is your typical angsty, misunderstood teen, a character straight out of a John Hughes film, basically. He's a queer teen who is ostracized by his classmates, and he's had a very strained relationship with his father because, of course, every teen drama needs a dysfunctional family. I should also mention that Jake loves dolls. Like a lot. Perhaps too much. Personally, as a fellow Jake, I still despise them. So Jake happens to stumble across a very familiar looking good guys doll in a yard sale. Now here is where the show diverges from its film counterparts. In the movies, Chucky is typically the solo player, bar a few times when Tiffany's around. Or Glenn. But in the TV series, Chucky kind of serves as this weird emotional support doll. He's kind of a paternal figure. He kind of acts as a mentor to Jake, and again it goes back to the Child's Play roots. He's pretending to be something he isn't. The show takes its time to explore Chucky's complicated relationship with Jake, which adds an unexpected layer of emotional depth to an otherwise blood-soaked narrative. He's trying to invade people's trust, he's trying to take advantage of the naivety and the innocence. And from Jake's perspective, you can definitely see why he would get manipulated by Chucky. I mean, he's grown up in a pretty messed up household, and he is initially being bullied by genuine scum of the earth. The Chucky series nails this high school trope by blending slasher movie violence with teen angst, and Chucky is more than happy to exploit Jake's pain, teaching him how to stand up for himself. With a knife.
Let me see what you have! No!
The show features several kill scenes which are over the top and darkly comedic, and of course there is the inevitable moment where Chucky starts turning the town into a series of homicides. And this is all while still maintaining his wicked sense of humour. You know, this is still the Chucky we fell in love with, he's just got a new bunch of teenagers to pick on. You get this great balance of Brad Dourif in the series, and that's why I said this series remembers the previous films and it's very faithful, and you get all of the tones of the previous films kind of merged together into this series. It hops from serious to comedic pretty efficiently, as opposed to constantly being this one thing and trying way too hard to be outrageous. It's like Don takes the best parts from every film and merges it all together to a good degree. I was interested in seeing how Chucky is going to work in a series format, and after seeing season 1, I was genuinely hungry for more. As the show progresses, Chucky's role in Jake's life deepens. It's not just about murder anymore. You know, Chucky is invested in Jake's well-being, well, in his own twisted way. You see, this is when the series takes the classic Chucky trope and injects it with something new. Relationships. This is kind of what makes the package of a TV series work, because when you get feature films, you just get a lot of rushed characters, and you end up with characters dying who I just don't care about at all, so, you know, whatever. You just don't get the runtime available, but in this series, you do, so that opens up a lot more windows of opportunity. Throughout the show, we see Chucky slowly manipulate Jake's relationship with other characters. The family drama with the killer doll twist mirrors other horror shows like Bates Motel, where the family and horror go hand in hand, and even American Horror Story, you know, season 1 Murder House, where the emotional chaos and murder are pretty entwined. This show format elevates this typical slasher genre because it focuses a lot more on the relationships of the different characters, and this is quite important because it's not just about seeing who Chucky is going to kill next, but rather who he's going to corrupt next, you know, who he's going to manipulate and who will that affect. So in a sense, it is still playing with the original Child's Play concept of Andy, except it's working with a load more characters. The Chucky TV show is unapologetically stylish, and it's one of the reasons this series works so well. Much like American Horror Story or Stranger Things, this show doesn't just rely on cheap thrills. The lighting is moody and the camera is frequently placed to give us that watched by a doll vibe. I also like the title cards for each show, they're just really slick. I don't know why I like them so much, they're all different. Chucky's face is often framed by a sharp contrast between light and dark, making him appear as both a beloved toy and a threat. The colour palette is vibrant and saturated. You got the bright reds and the neon blues, and they're used to give a sense of horror that's not quite natural. Plays into the voodoo stuff, I guess. For sure, this is my favourite shot in season 1. Like, oh my... ugh. It's almost like a dream world where the rules of reality bend, much like the nature of Chucky himself. The use of bright colours definitely distinguishes Chucky from a lot of darker, grittier visuals which you would typically get with horror films. And yeah, there is a lot of 80s nostalgia here, but it's definitely been updated for modern sensibilities, so in a sense it is colourful, but still creepy. The score by Russell O'Connor captures the ominous tone of a slasher whilst still bringing in modern electronic beats. Nearly all of the Chucky kills are accompanied by a jarring, high-pitched electronic hum, almost like a modern version of the Halloween theme, and it's where music and sound design mirror Chucky's omnipresence. A new implementation to the franchise is the use of pop songs, and I have to admit, I'm not too sure about these. I think a lot of TV shows in particular use a lot of pop songs to really nail in a point that doesn't really need to be nailed in. Like, the audience has already been told this. You don't need the lyrics to say the exact same thing which just happened. This TV show isn't the only thing guilty of this. Pop songs just a lot of the time get used as a crutch. I'm not a fan. I think just you don't need to use them. You really don't need to use that much. The following 2 seasons maintain this constant pace, and it's great because pacing is something which can really deter me from watching TV shows specifically. See, I'm not... Nah. Nah. Is this a scythe? Where did you get this? This is huge! Nah. What? Alright. Jeez. I'm not the biggest series person in the world, but Chucky seemed to be a pretty bingeable watch, you know, it was quite fun. Quite like you don't need to think too hard into it. We still get to see the backstory of Charles Lee Ray, who still remains a bit of an enigma despite there being so many previous films. And it's interesting because a lot of scenes in the show are actually in Charles's perspective, so it's almost like Don Mancini is trying to tweak the writing a little bit, as if he is trying to prove that the true horror of Chucky isn't in the doll itself, but the world that created him, and the world that continues to let him thrive. Whilst the rest of the audience still sees Charles as a psycho, because, you know, he is. Jennifer Tilly returns alongside Alex Vincent, Fiona Dourif, and Christina Release. I'm sorry, but I was not a fan of this transition. Oh my god, that is horrible. Oh my god, what is that? The inclusion of past characters who are played by their respective original actors was such a good move because there is an incredible level of iconography and nostalgia you get with older actors, and weirdly enough in the horror genre specifically. And to keep them involved makes the fandom feel a little more cared for. It makes things consistent. You see a character who has survived since the very early shows, and you just can't help but always root for them because they're still hanging on by a thread, despite everything working against them. If you're not a big fan of teen flicks or like any kind of social commentary for whatever reason, even though it's not egregious at all, then maybe you won't be the biggest lover of this series. But for those who love Chucky and all of its rollercoaster moments throughout these past years, I think you'll enjoy it. All in all, I would absolutely recommend the Chucky TV show. It's a fast, fun watch with a lot of great moments, which all do feel like homages to the original films. I'm not too mad about season 4 being cancelled, I mean, for whatever reason they had, but I don't like things being drawn out anyway, even if it did end on a massive cliffhanger. In my case, after rewatching all of these Chucky films and editing them for however long, the series ended up being an amalgamation of everything, you know, all the highs and the lows and the weird moments and the gore. And I've decided it really is a love letter to the fans of Chucky, you know, the people who have followed it from the start, in a similar way that Avengers Endgame, you know, was a bit of more of a fan service love letter as opposed to being some kind of critically acclaimed project. It was just more fun and it was a good experience. Don Mancini, I understand, is like Marmite. A lot of people wished Chucky was taken over by a different writer at many points, specifically during this phase. But I can't deny that since the first Child's Play film, Don has continued to show passion and consistency, and he's cared to make this franchise work, no matter which kind of bizarre way it went, and that's his personality, and a lot of his characters represent his own thoughts and emotions. Hopefully not when they're killing anyone, but you know, I don't know what Don gets up to in his spare time. The TV show has a lot of hilarious moments which do mirror what Don has always wanted Chucky to be. He is always a source of humour regardless of how dark things get. A lot of it is still self-aware, and a lot of it has these nice introspective moments which we saw so long ago with the oldest of the films. At its heart, Chucky has always been a story about identity. That's really what separates it. Who we are and who we want to be. Where do our morals lie? And it continues to hone in on these themes, especially the relationships between our characters, who continue to grow in unexpected ways. So I guess I'll put the TV show here. Wait, hang on. It's done. Wow, okay, this has been a journey. Well, that's it. We did it. This is the first consecutive series of videos I've ever done. The response has been absolutely amazing. I'm so glad to have had fun with this series, even though it has been a lot of hard work. There's a lot more I want to implement and improve with my videos, so I'm going to be doing that. And if there's any other films you guys want me to watch and talk about in these videos, just let me know. But until then, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, take care.